The web has long ago passed from being a place of posting electronic brochures. It isn't television, and it isn't the document, it isn't the brochure, and most of all, it isn't an ad. That seems to be the common misperception. People think, oh, I want an ad on the web. Well, great, you need those too, but that's not your website. Your website is a place of business. That's what your website is. Technically, we encourage that whatever you can do, now it's a little bit harder obviously for medical situations, not impossible, but harder. Whatever you can do in your office, you should be able to do through your website. The first decision that you're going to have to make as you go start this little adventure is what process you're going to use, and I already touched on that a little bit, but there are some justifiable other ways to do it. Do it yourself. Yeah, there are people who are naturally talented with electronic mediums. They've played with computers all their lives. They already are familiar with the concept of HTML and how it works. This is realistic in that sense. We don't think it's realistic in the sense of being another business decision. Again, what does your mechanic charge when he's working on your car? Now, whether you know how to work on your car or not, unless you enjoy it, if you're looking at it strictly from an economic perspective, it makes absolutely no sense, because chances are you could make 10 times what that mechanic makes in that same hour while you're working, so it makes much more sense to hire him and bring him in. So even from that perspective, there's kind of a logic you have to deal with. But that doesn't mean it's something you'd rule out, because again, if you are already someone who is real familiar with this environment, it's something you should at least explore. The other possibility is what we call template services. There are companies, WebMD, as we were talking with Diane earlier, is one of them, that you can go to, and they have kind of situations set up already that you walk into, and you don't really have to think too much except in providing the individual documents that represent your company. They're, for the most part, they run a gamut of whether they're expensive or cheap, but none of them are real cheap, and the ones that are worth anything sure aren't. So cost that depends how you look at it. Obviously, there's less upfront cost, but then you pay forever, so that's something you have to weigh. The other thing is that they're very limited. Very soon after you get into that situation, if you start exploring the boundaries of what's possible on the web, you're going to start running into, oh, no, sorry, we don't do that, or we don't allow that, or our technology doesn't support that. And it can be anything from simple like, well, I'd like to change the background color and make it different so that my clinic looks different than the other clinics. Well, I'd like to put this up. There's all kinds of those kinds of things. Generally speaking, the more flexible it is, the more expensive it's going to be. And the problem there is that it doesn't allow for a lot of growing into. If you start off with an inexpensive solution because that's all you need at the beginning, you quickly find yourself trapped in a kind of box. If you do it the other way around, then you're paying for a lot of things you don't need up front. The other possibility is to actually create an in-house team. This is something that even General Motors tried and declined and realized it made no sense. Now, the firm that they actually wound up with is a lot larger than the firm that I work with. But they decided it made a lot more sense to outsource it. The first thinking was, as any business person would think, well, it's going to be cheaper if I bring people in-house. Well, it turned out not to be the case, because it basically took people who were supposed to be focusing on cars and made them focus on the web. That became very expensive very quickly in ways that they had not anticipated. Finally, it's find yourself a consultant or developer. And that's the direction we're focusing on today. When you begin the process, after you've decided, okay, I'm gonna do this the right way, there's going to be a lot of issues. Now, the beginning consists of the issues that most people are not surprised by. What does the site look like? How what kind of style is it going to be? Where does my logo go? All of the things that basically are tied to ego, That's what it amounts to. All the things that, it's like, well, what kind of car am I going to drive? What's my office going to look like? The things that are about image. Well, that's great, and they're necessary. The thing is, what you want to do is make sure that those as a priority are in the right place, in the right order. What you don't want to do is pre-make those decisions and go to the consultant and tell him, this is what I want. Because then what you've done is created a box that you've painted now the consultant into that he's going to have to work around. And chances are you've created a can of worms that, whether you realize it or not, is going to wind up being a lot more expensive for you, because he's still going to try and do his best job for you, working around these very strict parameters that you've set for him. The process is the process. And it makes a lot more sense if you go into it with an open mind, ready to, trust in the process that it will get you to the solutions that are best for what you're looking to do. Next slide, I guess. One of the first things as far as look and feel is concerned is, like any other marketing materials that your company, and I'm going to use terms like that because essentially I'm assuming that the majority of you have either private practices or you work for small clinics or large clinics that you have something to do with their online medium, and that's why you're here. That being the case, you're a company like anybody else, and what's motivating you are the same kind of business issues that would an attorney or an accountant or a dentist or any other profession. We pretty much specialize with professionals at our firm, but that's kind of irrelevant. We also do e-commerce. In fact, this particular firm happens to be e-commerce. But there's very little difference in the big issues. Now, obviously, there are specifics. The point here is that you don't want to do things independently. You don't want to approach things on a one-by-one kind of, well, okay, I've got business cards now, so now let's think about this. No, if you do things correctly, what you want to try and think is like as a general. And these are your divisions, okay? And you want them all to be coordinated. You are doing what has commonly nowadays been called branding. Branding, a lot of people think, means putting your logo on everything so that people then know what your logo is. Wrong. That's not what branding is, okay? That's having a logo. And yes, you should take your logo and drill it into everyone's brain. And logo can be anything. It can be just how you put your name on a business card. It doesn't have to be a fancy circle thing with pyramids and stuff. I mean, it's a look. What branding is associating that logo with an idea, a philosophy, so to speak. The best example that I can think of that most people are familiar with is if I say to you, just do it, what do you think of? It's Nike, right? Who doesn't know that? So Nike has taken this little swoosh, and every time you see that swoosh, you don't think about sneakers, because they do everything now. You think about this philosophy of get up and go do it. That's branding. Essentially, this is a good thing that you want to do, because then once you've accomplished that, you can take that logo and put it on a T-shirt, and that's not just a T-shirt anymore. That's a philosophical statement that you're espousing to the universe about who you are. Now, should you be thinking on these terms when you've got one doctor, an assistant, and a nurse in your clinic? Yes. You're thinking on a smaller scale. Obviously, you don't need the whole planet to know just do it. But you do have your market, and you want them to think in those terms also. Should your, particular logo be branded with just do it? I doubt it. I mean, you're physicians, obviously. You need a whole different thing, and that's part of the process, is figuring out what makes most sense. Live a healthy life. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of taglines that have a philosophy behind them. But whatever you do, you have to make sure that the look is tied into that it makes sense, and that it's something that is flexible enough that it carries over all the different medium that you're going to do. Whether it's corporate video, your business card, everything you do, every time you place a classified ad, everything you do. So it should have one association so that when people see it, they immediately recognize it. The main thing about the look of a website in particular, more than those others, which is why we tend to focus on that more, is because it's not just a look. A brochure has information in it, but pretty much because it's just the English language and words, you can make the information fit almost any form. With the website, It's more like architecture, which happens to be my background in terms of education, and that's not a coincidence that this is the particular approach that we took, because that's what I knew. When we started, there really wasn't anything else to bring except your prior experience. So most people in the business wound up being either graphic designers or programmers. And, well, that's a whole nother lecture. Anyway, our approach is essentially following the philosophical maxim of form follows function. So the idea of trying to decide on a style, on a look first, and then figuring out how to make it do what you want is kind of like picking the paint color for your new house and then start looking for where you're going to build it. It doesn't make any sense. That paint color is going to be affected by, well, what neighborhood am I in? Is this a traditional place? Is it up in the desert? Is it in the mountains? Is it by the ocean? You got to keep things in order. A complex site, and this is a flowchart of a complex site. I mean, just to give you an example, that one little box up there represents a whole other section that's as big as this one. Requires complex solutions. You wind up, this is a large commercial site with menus. I forgot my little laser pointer today. I guess I can use the mouse itself, huh? Yeah. It shakes around a lot. No, that's useless. Anyway, the menu is one that kind of expands and opens up. And I'm not trying to espouse this as a particular thing, just to tell you that we decided we needed this kind of solution once we realized how huge and complex this site was going to be. We picked these two sites as extremes. On the top left, you have an interface that was designed in a 3D modeling kit. It's got all kinds of shadows, reflections. It's very intricate. It creates almost a playful kind of entertainment thing. Nothing is really clearly labeled. The idea is you kind of go in there and play. These people sell car parts for old, antique, restorable cars. So the idea was to make it playful and informative and have them enjoy themselves while they were there. On the other hand, here you have a large law firm that wanted to present more, on one hand, a conservative image, but not conservative in the traditional sense, because sometimes on the web that winds up looking hokey when you try to replace, stuffed leather chairs, and it can be pulled off, but you have to be careful. At the same time, the important thing to them was get the information to people. So you wound up with a very flat graphical interface. It's still beautiful as far as I'm concerned, but it was based on what are we trying to accomplish first. This is one of the corners that you don't want to paint your consultant into. It's called WWW, which doesn't stand for World Wide Wait. It's the World Wide Web, which means it's worldwide. Now, your market might be small, but small might involve a Vietnamese community, or Hmong, or Filipino, or Japanese, or Spanish. Well, something to keep in mind. It's not bilingual. It's bicultural. A little story. Pepsi went to Indonesia, and when they were there, they realized that they weren't getting through to the Chinese segment of the population in Indonesia. So they did a translation of their normal, we're the Pepsi generation, and they just translated it. And when translated back into English, it amounted to drink Pepsi, it brings your ancestors back from the dead. That's what translations can result in. You need to make sure you understand the culture you're in and make sure that the words have the meanings you want to convey, even if the idea gets changed a little bit. So translation is something that you don't want to depend on those mechanized forms for. You want a real person who understands that culture. And that can apply. In these two cases, it didn't. In these two cases, the English versions of the sites look exactly the same. But there can be times when even the images need to be different. There are areas of the world where a woman without something on her head is not a photo that you want to use. Men in shorts is not a photo that you want to use. So these are things that you have to be sensitive to. And those areas of the world, basically about 6 blocks from here. Now we get to the one that I warned you about. The website is a place. They don't call it cyberspace for nothing. This is an actual physical, in digital terms, location. It is your place of business. Just to touch on one last thing about the look and feel of the site. Keep in mind that if you do this correctly, you will have more people visit your website in 1 week than walk into your office in 1 year. So what you're talking about is the majority of the people, once you launch your website in a correct way, okay, because I'm assuming some of you at least have websites already that you've done by one of the other methods, the majority of the universe will know who you are, not because they've met you or because they've walked in your office, but because they did a search on Yahoo and they found your website. And they will make an impression right then and there. You will be judged. And you will be judged by your website, whether you like it or not. That is the new reality that we're in. And if those people are then to make that next step and actually contact you, they've got to be satisfied with what that first impression was. So keep that in mind as you develop look. But once you have contact with them, then it's a matter of, okay, they came to the website, they see what you're about, they like what they see, they want to do business. Are you capable of actually taking appointments for them right then and there? Once they become clients, can they make payments? And Jose, stop, because you're running ahead of yourself. This is an example, and in fact what's funny is I just noticed today that they're like, oh, thank you. Thank you. They're like the next complex over. As we were coming here. This is, yeah. You want your records, maybe not, on the web. We've had both from doctors so that patients can see their information. Well, okay, how about physicians that you consult with? This can be behind a closed door, so to speak. And you can share records that way. Can it be done securely? The answer is yes. Online payment also means you can sell products. This is a physician. He's selling a line of things that he came up with to try and keep his clients healthier. But for the average practice, why not just allow them to pay by credit card online instead of every time they come in? Maybe that's not convenient for them. The world has changed, and it's expected, especially if you're going to take advantage of what the web has to offer, that you change with it. The one thing that isn't going to happen, let me warn you, because you'll buck it. Everybody does. Everybody wants to know how they can take what they do and make the web do that. Not going to happen. You're going to try. You're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to walk away with a bloody head and stains on the brick wall you were banging up against. It's not going to happen. If you're going to really make it effective, it being obviously your presence on the web, what's going to happen is you're going to figure out how it works, and then you're going to take advantage of it. And one of the new maxims of the universe is that you're the one that makes house calls again. You make my life easier. I don't make your life easier. I don't conform to when you're not playing golf. Excuse the little jab there. It's a matter of, I've got 18 doctors I can choose from. Why am I picking you? It's because you're going to make my life easier and better. Now, I understand that the attitude has been, oh, that's because I'm the better physician. But you're looking on the web, where all he's looking at is your basically name, rank, and serial number. What school you went to? Well, he went to a school that was just as well, and what do I know anyway? What grades you got? How does he match that? No, essentially he's looking at, well, can you make appointments when I want them? Are you going to allow me to pay the way I want? How flexible can I be? Or how flexible can you be for my life? The more that you can adapt to them, the better. Now, does that mean that you personally have to change how your lifestyle is? No, not necessarily, because you can make things, and that's the purpose of the new technology, is to make my life simpler without making your life more difficult. And so that's the purpose of these types of tools. Greg, next time we got to make it so that I don't have to wait. My click is annoying. Here's another example of an appointment calendar. And the point I want to make here is what you see on the web is this, okay, is this screen, the one that's behind these little ones. This is something that was for a radio show, and basically it allows people, the potential guests for the show, to fix and adjust their own schedule. They don't have to call somebody and see if the slot's available. They just go there, they look, they do it themselves. To make that possible, there's an entire back end to this, admin panels. So it's not like you have to then call us or whoever your consultant is to make this thing function. There'd be somebody in your office who's going to be trained on this. But this is incredibly simple. It's something that you could expect an admin assistant within an hour or two to have it down and be able to take advantage of and run your office smoothly. And these kind of admin panels not only run guest lists, but all kinds of functionalities. So the more, in general, the maxim is if you make the more simple that you make your client's life, the more expensive it's going to be upfront for you. That's true. But then the end result of that is the more patients that you have that come in for you. So it offsets that. Well, it's the same thing in terms of actually building the site. The simpler you make it for yourself, and again, we're working from the assumption that you're going to do this the right way. You're not going to start cutting corners that are detrimental. Obviously, you try to save cost, you try to keep things as efficient and economical as possible, but that doesn't mean you cut things that you shouldn't have cut. So if you keep it under the right way, then you want to make it so that if you have turnover in your office, training the new person that comes in is not a very difficult thing to do. So you try to make things as simple as possible for them. Sure, but afterwards there'll be questions at the end. But please, go ahead.
No, I can take it. I won't forget it.
Great. I should have said that in the beginning. One of the things that you should consider when you're putting the website together is using what's called rich media. The example we have here is a video, and it's to show why things are never as simple as they kind of seem at first glance. This is all from the same video, but using 3 different types of players that are available on the web. The one thing about the web that I kind of have to keep repeating to people over and over again is this is not television. In television, you have the advantage, like the guy in the back of the room right now, you film it. You, meaning him, the director, is in control. He decides what the viewer is going to see, when, for how long, and when it's over. At what size, even at what time of day if it's broadcast TV. This isn't TV. On the web, the user has the power. The user decides what medium to use. So if you do it right, basically you do it in all 3 formats so that he doesn't have to download a new plugin and make his life more difficult, and he decides, it's not even worth it, and he's gone, and you lost another potential client, customer, patient. Doing all 3. No, not quite just that simple. Because one potential patient lives in an area that the phone lines stink, all he can afford is a 14-baud modem anyway, and he's got a 4-year-old computer, a Pentium 1 66. He barely downloaded Real Player. Do you think he can watch the same video clip as the guy who lives in an area that has Cox cable, just bought a brand new Pentium 4, and has 600 meg of RAM on it? Not going to happen. So now for each one of these, you've got 3 different versions. And they're programmed in such a way that you don't put the user, although I've seen it done 1,000 times, through a question and answer process of what speed are you on and what kind of processor. No, the software looks at the person's computer, sees what's there, and knows which one to feed to that person automatically. Does it have to be that expensive all the time? No. If you're Nike, yes. You want to reach the whole world all the time, every time. For a small medical office, chances are you can cut those kinds of corners where you decide, for instance, for my marketplace, for the people I'm trying to reach, what do we think is the most popular one of these? What would be the average speed and you kind of do a middle of the road. Maybe you do 2 versions of it. But these are things that you have to pre-think up front. It applies not only to video, but other things like I'm sure all of you have heard about Flash. This is something that, like most fads, when it first came in, and that's just now receding, it kind of washes everything in front of it away from it. So all of a sudden, everybody wants to do everything in Flash, which is akin to the hammer was just invented. So from now on, we use no other tools. We just use hammers for everything, including surgery. Not a good idea. The world would be a horrible place without hammers. So Flash is a great thing, but you need to keep it in place. You also have to remember what? This is not television. So you don't want to take your website and turn it into a one long movie. Video, the reality is that most people still are on slow connections. Even if they have a high-speed modem of 56K, that is really slow. But it's as fast as you're going to get on a telephone line. So you have to be considerate of that. If you've got a 20 or 30-minute video clip and somebody's on a regular telephone modem and they don't have a great computer, and I'm great, I mean they bought it yesterday because that's how fast things change, as I'm sure all of you know, you're going to be making them wait. And they better really want to see what you've got to show them if you make them wait. So there are ways around that. You can make it streaming, but your cost just went up because now you need a special server with special software, on and on. You can make it that it's downloadable, but it plays the minute the first part of it. There are all kind of choices, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details. What I am going to tell you is that these things need to be pre-thought out up front. Does that mean you have to know all of these issues? No. That's what your consultant's for. What you have to be is prepared when you hire him, her, to deal with issues that chances are were more complex than you thought when you first went in. It isn't let me know when it's done, regardless of how big the check you're writing out is going to be. Being a communications medium, that video is not just video in the sense of like a videotape. It means real-time communication. Earlier I said you could do anything that you could do in your office. Well, most of that, for the most part, unless you're going into the hospital, consists of consultation. You can do that over the web. With a setup like this, basically we've incorporated net meeting into the website. This is on our own extranet, by the way. Not only can you see the person, but they can actually talk to you the traditional way, like a chat room here. It would actually show her name, your name, her name, your name. But you can bring up a whiteboard and show examples of things, no, we don't want to put it there, let's put it here instead, during that same conversation. And she's got a file she wants to show me, so she can actually open up files and bring them up, and we're actually sharing that Word document and editing it together as we speak. Now, if those are the capabilities, then all you have to do is go the next step and imagine what the possibilities are in your practice. Is there a reason why she can't be disrobed? Is there a reason why you can't look at her? Now, have we had a doctor actually ask us to set up for that situation? Yeah. We've got a doctor that basically works with, how do you call it? It's the fertilization and, fertility. Thank you, Tom. Yeah. And they've got a situation. He's got a practice that's pretty much worldwide. It's a small office. There are only 2 doctors. But they're going to have, basically, daddy doesn't have to come from Indonesia to watch his wife give birth or be inseminated or whatever. So, yeah, it actually can be used in the same way, or at least to supplement those things. I mean, it's not like the wife is staying over there and the doctor's treating her this way, but he's sure making the experience a lot more pleasant for the husband. Doctors, like attorneys, if not more, usually publish a lot of their own materials, whether it be for research, whether it be to show to potential patients the areas of expertise. Generally speaking, these are things that are updated fairly frequently, and it doesn't matter if the article's by you or about you or whatever. This is another facet that can be taken care of on the day-to-day basis by people in-house. Your admin people, essentially, or yourself. I mean, it really is that simple. I just don't know if we're back to that whole kind of time thing. Is it really worth it? Does it make sense? The main question that should be in the back of your mind for a lot of this functionality stuff is how secure is all of this. Now, I know that there was earlier in the week a seminar on internet security, and frankly, we were asked to be part of that and kind of bowed out because we're not experts in that field by our own definition. It's kind of like the difference between you asking me to make sure that somebody can't get into your bedroom versus making sure that nobody can break into your bank account at the bank. We can handle your house. We can, this is what we do, is that level of it. But there's a whole other level of security that involves actually knowing different algorithms and protecting currency. And because we were not experts in that, we got out of that. But even on the small scale that we're talking about, I think it would be just as catastrophic to a doctor's practice if someone got into a patient's records that they shouldn't have, as if the bank down the street got robbed. In fact, maybe more so, especially for that particular physician. So it is an important issue, but it is one that the bank gets robbed. So can I say it's 100% secure with absolutely no doubt? No. Can I say that about Fort Knox? No. Can I say that about anything? No. But within reason, as secure as anything can be expected to be, yes, you can secure your information. I know right now it's very popular among the press to hype stories about catastrophes. Well, they do the same thing with fire. So does that mean you're not going to live in a house anymore? I mean, it just, you have to weigh things in a realistic way. The main thing you want to be concerned with as far as the security part of it is that not only is the hardware that you're on, the server that you're on, but the means of communication between you. So, for instance, if you're dealing with transferring records between the hospital and your office, which, as I understand, this hospital is set up, well, take it to the next level. How about between your office and a clinic, or between your office and a consulting physician? Right off the top, let me tell you this. Don't use email. If it's for anything important, do not use email. If it's anything more important than, honey, meet me at 5 o'clock, don't use email. You might as well have a megaphone and go stand on the corner. What you do want to do is do it through the website, just the same way as when you go shopping on eBay or Amazon.com, you look for that little lock. Same thing. If it's got that, then you know at least that immediate transmission is secure. But that doesn't mean that the information is secure on the server. You see, there's two different things there. There's one, can I kind of like wiretap you? In other words, while you're talking to you, can I tap that and find out what you're talking about? Well, yeah, if you see the little lock, essentially, you're safe from that. But what keeps it, once it gets to you, from me going into your file cabinet and seeing it, which hackers have figured out is actually a lot easier because most people's, background on security is the little lock. Well, the file server itself can be set up in secure ways where that information is encrypted also. So this is something that you're going to have to at least make sure that whoever you do deal with as your hosting agency is capable of and has. Does that mean you're out of that $29.99 a month hosting fee? Oh, yeah. But what's your information worth? So, like anything else, you've got to consider, the implications and the costs. There's also the ability to tie in your website to existing what we call legacy systems. A lot of offices already have databases, already have systems in place. Well, again, if your website is not an ad, if it's not a brochure, it's your place of business, and you depend on these other systems to drive that business, then the two of them have to talk to each other. Of course, in the beginning, if you're small scale, what usually connects them is there's someone standing in between, taking the file out of there and putting it here and vice versa. And often that's the most economical way. You're a small practice. There isn't a lot of need to coordinate the two of these together. Sure. But if you get to the point where, let's say you have a clinic where there's a lot of information coming, in and out, what sense would it make for there to be a calendar on the web where people can make their own appointments if then somebody has to transcribe all of that manually into some other database for people to see what their own appointments are? This is where you really start seeing that a website is not a brochure. Most of the projects that we work on, the majority of what we do, you will never see, which is why it is impossible for someone to call me up and tell me, hey, I want you to take a look at this website and tell me what it's going to cost to build one just like it. Impossible. Do not do that. On top of it being an insulting question, I mean, think about it for a minute. Hey, doc, I got a pain in my head, so what's it going to cost you to treat me? And that's how I'm going to decide whether I use you or not. No, it just makes absolutely no sense. And even you sitting there going, well, it's on the left side and I only get it at night, isn't going to be very helpful. I need to spend some time. Time equals money. Examining you, figuring out what's wrong, figuring out what the solution's going to be. Should I ask you to do that for free? And then once you've done it, then decide whether I'm going to pay you or not based on whether I like your diagnosis? Makes absolutely no sense. That's the work. That's what you do. Attorney is the same. Any other profession the same. It's different when you're talking about services like with an automobile, where you can look at something and go, you need a new water pump that's going to be $49. You're in a whole different league here, especially when you come to what's called the back end. And the back end is functionality. It is what the site does. So, if most of it is never accessible from the surface, I mean, think about it. The client payment, unless you're actually a client, unless you've actually got a username and a password, nobody will even know that application exists except for the little button on the main page that says client payment on it. If there's some kind of functionality that locks your office into another doctor's office so that you could share certain information, everything from that appointment calendar to payment to client records, nobody's going to know about that. No one. It's technically part of your website. It's going through that URL or a subdomain. So we'll build it. I mean, that's part of the overall plan. But the public will never see it. And of course, if it ties into the existing things, all the better. Now, this kind of tends back more to the website as brochures, marketing medium, so to speak. But what good is that if nobody can find it? And so right away everybody thinks, he's going to talk about search engines. Yeah. I mean, when you think that of all traffic, and this is an average, it's more or less for different sites, but on average, every click to a site at the percentage of 80% originates at a search engine. So that means everything else you do, I mean, that's kind of an astounding number when you think about all the money that people put into advertising, okay? I mean, you've got Ford spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on TV commercials, radio ads, print, buying banners, links on other websites, and all of those amount to 20% of their click-throughs. The other 80% are coming to search engines. It took Fortune 500 companies in America a long time. In fact, most of them still haven't woken up to the web. They're still trying to figure out, and with that much money and brawn, they might do it, who knows. But they're still trying to figure out what I suggested that you don't do, which is, well, this is how we do it. How do we make the web? So they'd rather reshape you. They'd rather mold the entire public than figure out how the web works and take advantage of it. So for years, and for most of them, even up till now, they refuse to deal with the search engines because it's complex. I would need a lecture 5 times this long just talking about search engines just to give you a clue of how complex. And at the end of that, most of you would leave like this. He's paranoid. Because that's what it amounts to. The search engines do everything they possibly can. I mean, start from the fact that they constantly buy and sell each other out. They merge. New ones that didn't exist 6 months ago exist now. The ones that existed 6 months ago don't exist now. That would be bad enough. They share each other's technology. They buy and sell results from each other. And who they buy and sell from at any given point changes. They use different algorithms. Some of them aren't even search engines. The famous example is Yahoo. What's your favorite search engine? Oh, I use Yahoo. That's great, but what I asked you was, what's your favorite search engine? That answer disqualifies you. That's not a search engine. It's a directory. What's the difference? Well, it's a technical difference. One uses search engines, not humans. One uses humans. A search engine has things called web crawlers or bots or spiders. There's all kinds of names that have been used. Little pieces of software that crawl around on the web, and every time it sees a link, it goes and investigates it. And it remembers what it sees. When you do a search, basically what it's doing is categorizing what it has found in the past that relates to what you asked in the closest way it can. A directory is not that. A directory is a human being sitting down trying to think of, okay, this site, the person that would use this best would be this person. And so they function completely differently. Every 30 days. For most, 90 days maximum. They completely change their algorithms. They completely become essentially a new company. They change how they do everything. I mean, if you think about it, that bot, that search engine, is going, okay, let me see. She typed in Dr. San Diego. So what am I looking for to give her back the best results? And some of them even rate it 98%, 94%, right? How they do that is called the algorithm. They change that all the time. Why? It's my fault. Actually, it's his fault. One of our divisions, as you noticed in the beginning, our firm consists of a lot of different divisions, and one of them is what's called SEO, Search Engine Optimization Company. And his job, our job, is to figure out how they do it, and then take our clients and make sure that for any appropriate search, you come up number one. Well, if I could figure that out, and we have, over and over and over again, because it's constantly changing, then that means we wouldn't need to buy all those ads. I mean, think about it. You use search engines. They cost you nothing. They're free. When you apply to the search engine, generally speaking, up until very recently, it costs nothing. It's free. So how did Yahoo make $4 billion last year? Well, that's because General Motors didn't want to take the time to sit down and figure out how to get ranked number one when you type in Ford Bronco. And instead, some little garage on the corner gets number one when you type in Ford Bronco. It's too much trouble. It's not something that you can quantify where a guy sitting in a boardroom with 30 guys with $2,000 suits on can give him a report and say, here we go, this is what we're doing, and these are our numbers for this month. You just can't do it. It's this nebulous kind of cloud thing. And yet, 80% of traffic originates at the search engines. So what that guy with the $2,000 suit on says is, forget it. We're going to circumvent the whole thing, and we're going to just add them to death. We're going to buy banners, and no matter what they're searching for, our Ford Bronco ad comes up. Well, that's great. Except in my generation, we learned to tune out television commercials and radio commercials real early on. By the time I was 12, I didn't hear it anymore, okay? Well, guess what the kids today are doing? And when I say kids, I'm talking about anybody under 30. You think they pay attention to those banner ads? Click-through rates on ads have pretty much disappeared. And we'll talk about banners and advertising in general, too. But the generations that primarily use the web traditionally, a tradition all of 2 years old, ignore those things. They want what they want. And you better learn to give it to them the way they want it, or you'll be a failure. It's that simple. And what they want is results that match what they were looking for. Only small firms have the time, effort, and energy to put into that. Is it cheap? No. On a small scale, no. To do it right, to do it where you're doing it really, really well done, you could spend $2,000 a month. This is not pocket change. Well, yeah, it is, actually, if you consider that one ad, one time, a full page in San Diego Magazine's going to cost you twice that. And what are you going to get, 5 calls? Try being number one in Yahoo under Physicians San Diego for a month. Tell me how many calls. No, not calls. Hits. You get out of that. And now tell me whether $2,000 was expensive or not. So it's all relative. But if you do it right, there's still nothing that beats being number one on the right placement in a search engine. At a certain point, you hit a wall. once you've done it right for a certain amount of time, and you are number one in all the correct categories that you're supposed to be in for people to find you, and again, that's another lecture that can last quite a while, because I can almost guarantee that the ones you should be in are not the ones that you're sitting there right now thinking you should be in. You're thinking about the obvious ones. You're thinking about the ones, well, I want to be in Physician San Diego. I want to be in my specialty. I want to be, well, that's great. But you also need to be in the ones where people weren't looking for you, where they were doing a more broad search. That's where the gravy is, you see. Those are the clients you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. This is the one that he was looking for something that was kind of unrelated, but now that he sees your information, it's like, well, maybe I can check that out. Boom, you've got a new, shall we call them customers from now on? Patients. One of the things you want to do is make sure that like enterprise are linked together for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, the search engines, one of the things that some of them use sometimes, which is about as definitive a statement as you can make about search engines, is how many other sites are linked back to you to decide how important you are. If nobody on the web has a link to your website, you can't count for very much, can you? So, as many sites as possible linked back to you. Now, in our search engine optimization division, we know that. So we basically have interweb set up between our clients so that day one on the web, boom, you've got 200 sites already linked to you. That's not enough. It's a good start. It's better than starting with nothing, but it's not enough. So every time you visit another site, you write to them and you ask them, you want to exchange links? Costs you nothing except for that 2 minutes, and you have a form letter by that point that you just basically put in their address. And if they say yes, you put in the link, and each of you just went up one little notch. It also works in the way that sometimes one entity will have more than one face on the web. You may also own a pharmacy. You may have your private practice and also be head of a clinic. Well, you can link those three together, and now you've entered a whole different field. It's not just a matter of, looking good for the search engines. Now it's a matter of driving cross-traffic. If somebody just came back from your clinic, don't you think they need their prescription filled? So you start bouncing them back and forth between each other. And you can expand that, and that's what the little lines between the sites. These are essentially 3 different websites. And the lines between them are the connections. And essentially, you can expand that to whatever, you've got friends, you've got physicians who are not in the same practice. You don't want to do it with your competition, obviously. But there are others who are complementary to what you do. That obviously, if you're a back specialist, well, it would be nice to have a deal with the radiology clinic that does x-rays, wouldn't it? And you're sending traffic automatically back. What I'm saying right now is kind of like, a kid would go, well, duh. Yeah, exactly. It's just like real life. The same kinds of connections and networking that you do in real life, you do in virtual reality also, except they take their own form. And whenever, in real, hardcore marketing terms, like people who design supermarkets, for instance, okay, their goal is to create kind of a maze. Real easy to get into, real hard to get out of without buying something. Every way. It's everything from, they know from psychological testing that everybody who walks in makes a right. They just know that. So that's how supermarkets are laid out. Nobody goes left. Next time you're in there, you want to be a rebel, just make a left. Fruits and vegetables are almost always there. Milk is going to be in the back left-hand corner. The gum is on the way out. Why? Because they know how people work. Well, those kind of tricks can be used also in the design of a website. And again, when we're talking about the design of a website, we're not talking about that one pretty interface. We're talking about all of the things that we've been talking about today, and including how your site links to the rest of the web, because it is only a single website. This is a bigger site. This is for a law firm, and it kind of takes the kind of stuff that I'm talking about to an extreme. It's difficult. Let's say you have a hospital or a large clinic. What's your specialty? Well, geez, we do everything. Ooh, what does a search engine do with that? You fit no place. You fit every place. You're listed almost under everything as number 37,432. which is useless because nobody goes past the third page. The average person only sees the first page. In fact, studies have shown that you're much more likely to open up 3 different browser windows with 3 different search engines and look at the first page of results for each one than you are on one of them to dig down past the first page on that one search. You got to be on the first page. So if the search engine is looking for exactly what that person asked, and because the average person doesn't know how to use a search engine, they usually do 2-word searches, and they don't use and. They don't know Boolean method. They just don't know how to do searches. So they'll type in physician San Diego. You've got to be physician San Diego. Well, geez, your clinic is worldwide. How do you do that? You've got every city on the planet named there. The person types in back pain, and that's it. Well, yeah, you do that, but you also cover feet and brains and eyes and everything else. Okay. One of the ways is you create doorways. Doorways are basically you take your main site, so you have cglaw.com, and you put a slash behind it, and you put /back pain. On that doorway, you have information about nothing but back pain. The spider sees that and logs that. So if they type in back pain, are they going to find your site? No, but they'll find your doorway, which is then designed in such a way that it funnels people into the main site. Well, about 2 years ago, we got really good at this, to the point that the search engine said, somebody's kind of fixed the roulette wheel in Vegas here. I don't think so. We can still kind of pull this off on about 2 or 3 search engines, and it works okay, but for the most part, they've figured it out. So counter and no good. Next step, and this is how the whole thing works. I'm kind of giving you a synopsis of it. It's like a chess game that basically we sit there, we play chess against them constantly. When we find the winning move, we go, well, we got one. We go back to our clients, apply that to their sites, and come back and continue the game. We took the doorway and we said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to make it a completely independent site. We're going to buy you a whole new domain name. So it's not even on technically it's not on your site at all. It's a whole new site just about back pain. That's it. In the beginning, you have to be so kind of semi-devious about it. You have to give it a completely different look. You couldn't show in any way that it was connected. But there would be links, and the most prominent of it visually would be back to your main site. See, bots and spiders aren't looking for the same thing human beings look for. Even though that what we call satellite pages, which is what I'm describing, would have 3 to 5 pages in it, because you have to have enough content to convince the bots and spiders that this is a full, worthwhile site worthy of being ranked. And it also has enough content about what that particular keyword is to get the ranking that you want, even though you don't want people spending time there. You want people getting to that first page and clicking the one that says, come to my main site. So you design on one level for the bot to make him continue on through that site. And as far as the bot is concerned, the link to your home page is just one more link among several others that you have there. But visually, there's a big graphic that says, click here, and that's what the human being. So we're back to kind of the department store with, what way you turn when you walk in the front door. For human beings, it's very different than it is for bots. Well, that's working fairly well right now. But what we found is it can be kind of expensive for clients. And so over time, you're doing a lot of redundancy. Well, you already had a whole section on back pain, just to continue the same analogy, in your website. Now you have to write a whole new one on top of buying the domain and hosting it and designing a new site. And really, the big part of it, expense for you, is the content, because I can't write the section on back pain. You've got to do that. And you've got to give that to me, except you'll do it under one of our people's guidance so that it's chock full of keywords and all kinds of other stuff. But you're going to tell me about it. So in a way, it's most expensive because it takes time. And for the majority of professionals we deal with, time is much more expensive than money. So we figured out how to do what we call ITDs, which is Integrated Target Domain, which is basically a satellite built into the website itself. Thing is, now you've taken something that up to now was an afterthought. Well, we'll figure out how we're going to promote the site once we got it up and running. And now we've made that the last thing, the only thing that was not part of a unified approach to web design is now. because now the satellite pages are in the website itself. And what happens is when somebody actually gets to your front door, your main page, as they click on the different buttons, on the normal site, they'd just be going to separate sections of your website. Technically, what they're doing now is jumping between all kinds of different websites, each one with its own separate front door. Except when they click from here, that's not where they're going. They're going into the heart of it. But that's where the bots went. So the bots register each one of these as a separate website, one of them being for back pain. So everybody that goes to Yahoo, Alta Vista, X site, and is searching for back pain isn't coming in through your front door. Again, this is not television, nor is it a movie, nor is it a novel. Those are linear forms. They have a beginning where you start on a first page. They have a middle. I, the writer, I, the director, tell you what order to read things in. You don't go to page 7 and then read page 3 and then read page 39. You read 1, 2, 3 because I told you to do it that way. It's not how websites work. In the website, I'm creating all of this, and I'm telling you, you navigate it the best way you need to for what your needs are. And as the designer, my job is to make that process as easy as possible. The reality is, you're not my client. Your client is my client. That's who I'm working for. That's whose life I'm trying to make easy. You're paying me, but that's whose life I want to make simple. That's who we want being real comfortable with this environment and finding what they need very quickly. And obviously a big part of that is finding the sites to begin with through the search engines. I'm going to start trying to wrap up here. I told you I'd mention banners. Banners, advertising in general, not really worth that much anymore. There are exceptions. For larger entities, when you want to do the branding, remember branding? It works well for that. To get an image, an idea in front of people's faces over and over again. But the old way of measuring by click-throughs, it's not really that valid anymore because, again, people kind of take in the advertising subliminally. If you expect them to click right then and there and buy something like that, you're going to be disappointed. And sorry to say, a lot of people, that's what they've been led to believe is how it should work. But that doesn't mean that there aren't times when it should be used. One of the things that we're doing now more and more often is offline methods of driving people to the site. We believe this right here is the future of business cards. Why hand somebody a little piece of paper that the only information on it, unless you're going to turn it into a little mini book, is your name, rank, and serial number? What good is that? When you can hand them a disc that has the story of your life in living color, with music and animation and diagrams and flowcharts. In other words, just like, in fact, that's what we're doing right now is making one of these. I'll have it for you in a couple of months if you like. And now when I hand somebody my business card, they're going to hear everything I just told you. And it doesn't just have to be video, because we'll have this part of the presentation in there. There'll also be print materials that you'll be able to print out and download from that every time I give somebody a business card. And most importantly, these presentations, they are a little bit, in general, more linear than a website is. But they are still interactive so that people can come and go into different areas. But they all end in the same place, which is a big button that says, click here. Guess where that goes? To your website. One more way of driving traffic. How many people do you think really read a magazine and see a URL and remember it? You go to a trade show, you get inundated with people trying to get you to their websites to actually do an action where you buy something. How many of those URLs are you going to remember? Okay, they give you a brochure, they give you a business card. Are you really going to go home and pull that out and kind of, I can't read this thing, and type it in? But if you got this cute little thing, you'd be kind of curious. Well, what do they got on this thing? And stick it in there. And you're halfway to getting them to the site, to performing for you. The question that we get hit with all the time over and over again is money. And I've kind of covered it for the most part here, but a few final notes here. What you want to do when you're trying to decide, okay, I'm convinced, I've been listening to Jose for an hour, and you know what, that made a lot of sense to me. I'm going to basically go ask our admin girl to bring Microsoft front page back to Computer City and get our money back, and we're going to hire a consultant, okay? How do I pick one? I look in the phone book on the web designer. There's not many. But I look in the Yahoo, and Web Designer San Diego, and there's thousands. How do I pick one? Well, you want to eliminate the mistakes that you've already realized that you should eliminate. So you want to sort out the kid that's 17 years old, but he knows all about web design, who's working in his mom's basement. You kind of want to rule that out pretty quick, because you've entered into a field that is impossible for a single person to be able to take care of. We hate the term webmaster, always have, because of the implication. It brings along this baggage that says it is actually possible for one human being to know everything that you need to know. It is not possible. We've got a staff of 17 people, 10 full-time and the other 7 contractor and part-time. I'm about 9 people short of having a full deck here of all of the skills. And so we're constantly having to bring in outside consultants to kind of fill our team, because there'll be a client that comes along that wants a particular thing that, well, that's not one of the ones we carry, so we have to bring in another consultant. And of all of those people, there is not a single one that I could walk over to his desk, her desk, and say, get up, let me do it. Not one. Not one. So how are you going to hire a person? How is that possible? They're going to know everything they need to know about programming and building shopping carts and security. Oh, they're good with animation too, right? And they're whizzes, the next Steven Spielberg with video, on top of the fact that they're great graphic designers. And they know all about the technological side of how to hook up the bandwidths and your servers and how to pick a hosting company. It's not going to happen. Okay, so you've narrowed down to it's obviously going to be a professional firm. Still, how do I do it? Obviously, it can't be about how much it's going to cost, because we don't know what it is yet. It's a hard question. I haven't got a perfect answer for you. But as close as I can come to is this. Look at their resume. Look at the portfolio. Look at what they've done and for who. Are we talking about Joey's garage that's not much better than the garage this kid is working out of? Or are we talking about firms that are similar to your situation? That doesn't mean they necessarily have to be in the medical field, but are they similar size, similar earnings, similar market? Then call those people, talk to them, and ask them what the experience was like. In other words, you're going to do it kind of similar to somebody trying to find a doctor or a lawyer. You want referrals. You want to know, hey, is this guy going to, forget the tools inside of me when it's all over? Or is it somebody that you had an experience under very traumatic conditions that you could not tell what they were going to be before you walked in, but you came through it okay because they guided you through the process? Get that on your own. Don't depend on me to tell you about it, because I can jimmy rig that, and so can everybody else. Get it on your own. Just look at the portfolio, look at the clients they work for. There's going to be a contact page someplace. Get the phone number, call them up, ask them who's in charge of running their web enterprise, and talk to that person. And when you found the one that has the same kind of demographics that he works for, someone that you've looked at the websites and you yourself pretty much figured out what you were doing on those websites pretty quick. You got around very quickly, and they were smooth and easy to understand. And you've spoken to previous clients, and those clients had nothing but rave reviews. Oh, yeah, there were even problems that we hadn't foreseen, but we came through it okay. Yeah, it was a little bit more money than we expected, but we were told beforehand that everything was... When you find that person, get your checkbook out and be prepared to write a lot of checks. Because that's as good as I can tell you as far as getting guidance on that person, that firm, that entity. Being a little facetious there, but not as much as it sounds like. Because it's going to be fairly expensive. You're not talking about an enterprise that you write a check for $2,000 or $3,000 and it's finished. And there are ongoing costs. The budgeting is something that the only thing that I can tell you in a few minutes is treat it the same way you treat every other aspect of your business. Like I was talking about earlier, how many people go into your website every week versus how many people come into your office every year? Think about it like per heads. You bought a $1,400 couch. In a year, 97 people sit on it. 97 divided by $1,400 tells you what you were willing to spend for that person's enjoyment sitting on that couch. Now, tabulate your entire office. That beautiful mahogany desk and the front end partition and the subscriptions to magazines in your front office. And figure out, okay, this is what it's worth to me to keep one of my clients, one of my patients comfortable and have the facilities to give them what they need. You're going to do the same thing for the website. What do you need to accomplish? And that's what it's going to cost. If you do it right and you work with a consultant that knows what he's doing, you're going to be along in the process before you're committed to actually building it and have an idea of the cost. At our firm, we basically break it into two sections. The first is the strictly consulting phase. It, depending on the size of the job, can last anywhere from a day or two to 3 or 4 months. We've had them go as long as 9 months. And in that 9 months, or 3 days, basically you're doing a question and answer. You're going back and forth trying to figure out who is this site for, what's it aimed at, what are you trying to accomplish, what are the goals, and how are we going to accomplish them. And during the entire process, you're constantly banging up against the consultant going, well, that's a great idea, but give me an idea. What are we talking about here? Well, if you did that, that'd be about $60,000. Yeah, great idea, but not that great. Forget it. Scratch. Well, can we do it another way? Yeah, we could do it like this and like this and like this. Okay, what's that going to be? Well, that's about $8,000, $9,000. Yeah, we got to have it, and it's worth that. Put it in. So that at the end of it, and there is no point where it's like, go away and come back and tell me how much it's going to be. That's not going to happen. But at the end of this process, there'll be a report. And in that will be a budget. And that budget, you'll know even before the report's done because you helped create it. And what you've done is ensured that it's enough to accomplish the goals that you've set with the consultant. And at the same time, it's also something that you can actually pay because in the process, you had complete control of that. So by the time you get to that report, essentially what you have is the contract. And at that point, you have the go, no go. Now, have you spent money to get to that point? Yes. But minuscule in comparison to the project. If it's a large project. The thing is, when it's a smaller project, then percentage-wise, it might be higher. So, for instance, if you're talking about an overall, and, you know, I don't know how you react to the numbers, but let's say $50,000, okay, to everything. In other words, to design the site, to get it up and running on a host, to set up the first year's promotion. Of that initial period will probably be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. So essentially, it's going to cost you between $5,000 and $10,000 to find out that it's going to cost you another $40,000 to actually build the thing. Thing is, when you go in larger projects, the percentage drops dramatically. I mean, that 5 or 10 becomes 40 or 50, but the 40 or 50 becomes 8 million. So it really is all about scale. But it's worth doing because this way you know what you're getting into before you make that big commitment. And the second advantage is if you do it that way, at the end of that first step, you actually have enough information where you could go to another developer because now you've got pretty good specs and go, what would you charge me to build this thing? If at that point you've decided you don't like working with the person you got to that phase with. That's how the web works. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. We are going to be doing an audio cassette of this, and it should be available within a few days. So if you'd like that, in the back, Maria will be, you can give her your business card or sign up for it. In the meantime, there's a few examples of the biz cards that we talked about and brochures. And if you ever need our help, we'd be more than happy to talk to you. And by the way, the first consultation, if it's at our office, is gratis. Thank you.